Magnus is the GOAT, but Batman's movie cannot be great without the Joker. Note, our movie has a great end as well. E4, c5, played by Morozevich, knight f3, knight c6, and d4. After d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, g6. This is what's so-called the Accelerated Dragon. One of the most solid Sicilians, but in the meantime, it's a bit passive. Knight c3, played by Morozevich, bishop g7, Magnus played. Now, the knight is under fire, so bishop e3 to support. Knight f6, bishop c4, and now one of the old lines and one of the new lines, which is queen a5. Why queen a5? Very quick. Here in this position, the main idea for white is to go for what's so-called the Yugoslavian attack, like for example f3, queen d2, bishop b3, castling long, g4, h4, h5, bishop h6, etc, etc. But in this position, black found a solution, which is a queen a5, very practical one. After queen a5, guess what? The only move for white is to castle short if he wanted to fight. For example, if you would like to go for queen d2 in order to castle long, now knight takes e4 is just killing. After knight takes e4, queen takes d2, get rid of one of the defenders of the knight, and after bishop takes d2, knight d4, you will get your piece back and you are a pawn up. So not to make it a theoretical session, after queen a5, castling short is the most important and the main idea. Castling, and now one of the ideas for black is knight takes e4, and after knight takes e4 there is this d5. In order to get rid of this idea, bishop b3 just played. And normally in chess, do not hang your pieces. What does that mean? Do not keep your pieces unprotected. Make sure that your pieces, every single piece is protected, even if it's not attacked. By this, you avoid many tactical issues that you might face in the future. After bishop b3, d6, and now knight g4 is a strategical threat. The bishop here is well placed to support the knight. You might ask, but why the bishop must be here? Why don't I simply take the knight, for example, knight takes c6, for example, say you go rook e1 and knight g4, and then okay, I'll take knight c6 first, attacking your queen. The issue with knight c6, there are two issues. Main one is you open the b file for the rook. Second one, you don't understand the position. This pawn structure, actually, the main idea for white is to go knight d5. This is the main idea. And after knight d5, knight d5, knight takes d5, e takes d5. The plan is this one. Taka, and now rook e1, rook e2, rook e1, attack on e7, and make a huge pressure there. This is the main strategical plan. So when you take knight takes c6 in this position and b takes c6, then what's your strategical plan? You don't have a strategical plan here, and you're just losing. I mean, strategically losing. So after d6, h3, now bishop d7, Magnus played. Morozevich went very active with f4. Knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, and now bishop c6. After bishop c6, the pawn is under fire, so many ways to protect it, but queen d5, Morozevich choose. After queen d3, knight d7 is played in order to exchange the two bishops. By the way, this is a typical exchange. White has a kind of space advantage, so let's get rid of some pieces. Bishop takes g7, king takes g7, and now knight d5. See what Morozevich wanted? Bishop takes d5, e takes d5, and again, the rook to be coming and double up rooks and attack on this guy on e7. Magnus understood that and played queen c5 check. After queen c5 check, simply king h1, and now kick the knight away. There's a problem with this idea, which is what? The d6 pawn is weakened. And after knight c3, rook a d1 is a threat, the pawn will be taken. In order to counter that threat, or to respond to it, after knight f6, rook a d1, rook a d8, and now the pawn is protected. What should Morozevich do? Or does? Morozevich is a very dynamical and very active player, so he went on to play f5. f5 has a negative or a disadvantage, which is the e5 square, but it has another advantage or two advantages, opening the f file and weakening this diagonal for the bishop. So Magnus played queen e5 in order to make use of this interesting, very important square. By the way, quick just reminder or quick information to mention. Here there is what's so called a long distance between the knight and the bishop, or sorry, the queen. So the knight needs 4 moves to attack the queen. Knight e2, knight g1, knight f3. So the queen here cannot be attacked by pawns, cannot be attacked by the light squared bishop, and it takes too much time to be attacked with the knight, so this is a stable square for the queen. Rook d1 anyways, because the pawn was under fire, and now b5 is played, and Morozevich went on to play very dynamical chess. Knight d5, what a move. Now matters are complicated, and after knight d5, it's not easy to respond. It's not easy to be black here, because if you take e takes d5, e takes d5, the queen will be attacked. If you take queen takes b2, which is the only move, now d takes c6, and this is a passer. The bishop is great. These 2 rocks are very powerful, so black is dying. After knight d5, Magnus found that best move, knight h5, and after knight h5, knight g3 is a threat. So rook e3, Morozevich played in order to improve the rook, and in the meantime, stop any source of checks here. Magnus played a5, wanted to go a4 to catch this bishop. So f6 first, and after king h8, Magnus or Morozevich played a3, making room for the bishop to go back. Queen takes b2. I mean, the best move here for black is bishop b7. Why? After queen b2, now knight e7 came with tempo against the bishop, so there's no time for knight f6. After knight e7, bishop back to a8, Morozevich took the pawn, Magnus took the pawn, and Morozevich went on to play queen g5. Queen g5, the knight is under fire now with the queen and the rook. Knight takes e4, queen h4, the knight is under fire, so rook takes e4 now is a threat in order to take 2 pieces with the rook, and the king is under a huge, not huge, but under pressure at least, because of the dark square weaknesses. So Magnus has many moves here to save the game. Rook d8, part of them. So after you take, I take, you take, I take the knight, for example. Or a crazy, very crazy move, which is g5, which is very, very unpractical idea. Maybe in a classical chess, Magnus would found this idea. But I mean, why to weaken my king? That's why here in this position, Magnus played queen e5. But this was a very bad move. Why is that? So stop the video and try to find out Morozevich idea. Rook takes f7. Oy, oy, oy. How did he find this idea? Very interesting. Now there is a fork between, or a potential of a fork between the king and the queen after knight g6. It's clear that h takes g6 is not there because the pawn is under the pen. So the only defender of the g6 square is this pawn. So let's get rid of it. Rook takes f7. And after rook takes f7, a queen a1 check. Here in this position, rook e1 has to be played. But Morozevich played king h2. With time trouble, and it's a blitz game, he missed that up. And guess what? Magnus can take the rook and win the game. Okay, check king h1, check again, and king h2. Another chance. Magnus, take the rook and take the game. No, queen e5. King h1, queen a1. Now interesting. Now it's interesting. Why? Because here, Morozevich could just play king h2. Lower rated. Magnus, the #1 player in the world, in the classical rating. I do believe in the blitz as well. So after queen a1, Morozevich said no draw. Rook e1. And now queen is under fire and there's a checkmate threat. So queen takes e1, queen takes e1, rook takes f7. And it seems that black has a decent compensation. 1 pawn, 2 rooks for the queen. But there are tactics. Knight takes g6. What's knight takes g6? Wait a second, there's a pawn. No, you cannot take because of queen h4 check and your rook will be taken. So after king g7, queen takes a5. Now the rook is under fire again. 2 pawns just suddenly disappeared. And after queen a5, rook e8. Okay, fine, knight h4, the knight is back. King h8, a way of checks because sometimes queen is coming. And now king h2, a way of the knight's checks and the rook's checks. So d5 is played, queen b6, no d4. He said, okay, fine, rook f2, e7, knight f3, knight f3. There's a dangerous strategical threat, which is knight e5. So pawns will be blocked. That's why Magnus played e5. After e5, the queen came closer to the king, queen h6, knight h5, and now knight g5. Well, make sure that you will not be mated in one. But this was not the best move in the position. The best move was to keep the bishop. Not only keeping the bishop, actually, but by moving the bishop away, you keep the c2 pawn here. I know that it's like a separated pawn, but it stopped the d4 passer. So after knight g5, knight takes b3, c takes b3. Now Magnus pushes the pawn, e4, queen f6 check, king g8, queen f4. And that's why I told you at the beginning of the video, the end game will be fascinating. We all know or heard of the knight and the bishop collaborate better than, the knight and the queen collaborate better than a bishop and a queen. See how the knight and the queen collaborated. After queen f4, Magnus just pushed the pawns. What's going on? Queen g4. Now some discoveries, so away with them. And now queen f5. Why queen f5? Two pawns are running. First of all, you cannot defend against these two. So either you do counterplay, either you do counter threats, or you will be losing if you defend passively. So after queen f5, Magnus said, okay, I'll go e3, I'll go e2, I'll have a queen. But now see this idea. Check, king g7, and now knight d6. And in this position, warning, black has only one move to survive and to stay in the game. Though it's not super clear what's the threat of white. Okay, there's a clear threat, which is knight takes e8, but it's fine, like knight takes e8, you'll get an exchange. I too have two passes, so materially, I can give up an exchange. Maybe I can give up even a piece. But there is a higher threat against this king. Here, Magnus had to find bishop e4. But this is very unpractical. Because, first of all, I can take it. Second of all, the rook will be taken with check. I do have many checks here and there. That's why here, in this position, after knight d6, Magnus said, okay, e2. Even if you take my rook, I'll take back, and now e1 is always a threat. So now either you take the perpetuals, if you do have it, or I'll be winning. But after e2, queen g5, very strong move. And now either you go king h8 or king f8. It's a remove move, which is queen f6 check. And now only moves king g8. And now knight f5. Oi, 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 oi. A checkmate here. It can be stopped, but that will be for the cost of the game. Here Magnus just resigned. Because if you want to stop the mate, probably h6 or h5 is necessary, but now at least I can take the rook, knight takes e7 and win the game. Queen g6 is winning, computer says, but knight takes e7 is simply winning. The point is you cannot go to h7 because of checkmate. So you have to take the knight again. I mean, two rooks, and not only two rooks. The passer is just stopped. I mean, this is just a disaster for Magnus. What a game! Very fascinating game. What's interesting about this one is how calm was Morozevich and how focused he was during the game. I hope you like it. If you like this content, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and see you soon.